Hey, I'm Amanda from Trifecta Fitness. We're proud to be Clarksville's new Get Fit headquarters. Trifecta Fitness is a state-of-the-art spin and strength training studio. Our spin studio is truly one of a kind in this area, complete with 20 state-of-the-art live fitness bikes and an incredible sound system. Our strength training is done in small groups of 6 or fewer, and all of our strength and spin classes are scalable for every level of experience. Come see us in the heart of Clarksville, just behind MAPCO at the corner of Old Trenton Road and Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. Call us for more info at 931-542-6265 or download our Trifecta Fitness app for a full list of upcoming classes.
All right. Welcome back.
MisFitNation Show.
We are a show founded by a veteran and hosted by 2 veterans and a military spouse. Our mission is to get people to tell their stories to the world. If you're an author, share your tips with the Misfit Nation. If you're a musician or an actor, our audience needs to know how they too can get into the business. Coaches, we love our coaches. Come on and share your tips with the Misfit Nation to help them become better versions of themselves. If you are a corporate leader or an entrepreneur, come on and show how you did it and how hard you have fought for success. If you are a veteran, first responder, or Gold Star family, we would love to have you come on and share your story with the Misfit Nation. We always have time for you. If you're feeling down, alone, or starting to see the darkness, stop. Think about those who are around you. You are not alone. You will be missed. If you feel like your problems will be a burden to those in your inner circle or feel embarrassed, dial 988. If you are a veteran, take option 1. We need you to keep pushing forward. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you are a new listener, welcome to the Misfit Nation Show. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. Also on our YouTube channel at @the_MisfitNation. Subscribe and click the bell to keep you up to date on our latest episodes and all of our news. You can also find us on Heroes Media Group and About Face Radio. Now, let's get to the show!
All right. Welcome back to the Misfit Nation. It's our Tuesday after dinner show. Coming to you from the East Coast again, from Indiana. Like I told you last time, we'll be here until the 26th of February. It's a whole different world up here, but we're hanging on. We're doing our best up here and actually doing well with our connection. So thanks for jumping in and hanging out with us. Today we meet a great guy, Jeff Mattingly at Mattingly Distillery. He gave us a great tour of his distillery down in Frankfort, Kentucky, and the Kentucky National Guard were a great host as we briefed them on our capabilities. But today we have a great guest. She's a fellow veteran, a Marine Corps veteran. She joined in 2010, completed her recruit training Parris Island. Then she attended Marine Corps training at Camp Geiger and then the Defense Institute Information School at Fort Meade. So she got to hang out with some Army people for a little bit and get indoctrinated with them. So she didn't go full Marine right away, I guess. And then she was at Marine Base Quantico, served as a staff writer. And since then, she has become a PA, public affairs specialist with the Department of Agriculture. She's a veteran advocate, and she does so many more things. If I read her bio, we'd be on here for the whole time of the show. So I will let her tell us more about her. So without further ado, let's welcome USMC veteran, podcast host, veteran advocate, Tab Bartley to the show. Welcome, Tab.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I didn't want to read the whole thing. It would have took me the whole 30 minutes to read it and try to get it correct.
Understood.
I'm honored to have you on here. I seen you on my brother Willis's show, the Homefront Sit Rep, and I said she'd be a great addition to the Misfit Nation. And luckily, we got you on early since a slot opened, and this is awesome. So thanks for being here.
Yes.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to leave the floor to you to tell us more about Tab from as far back as you want to go to the reason why you joined the Marines instead of the Army and how we came forward.
Yeah, so I am, funny enough that you're in Indiana. I'm from Lafayette, Indiana. I went to Jefferson High School, graduated from there. And funny enough, I was a 21st recipient, scholarship recipient. So I was in community college when a Marine Corps recruiter called me and was like, hey, you want to come in and talk? Caught me on a good day. I was like, sure, but there's no way I'm joining the Marine Corps. Lo and behold, went into his office. We started talking about the Yankees. I was a huge New York Yankees fan. We were talking about Bernie Williams, Derek Jeter, and like that era. And he was from New York, and just started talking about all these things, humanitarian missions. And then he told me about the career field public affairs. And I knew in that moment, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Was like, okay, I'm going to become a Marine. Had to wait 5 months to join the delayed entry program, and then another 11 months so that I could get public affairs. Joined. I said first duty station was Quantico. Best place I could have started. Worked for the last newspaper of the Marine Corps. Helped stand up some of the first social media accounts of the Marine Corps, and then I got to run the community relations program there. And then I PCS'd to recruiting station Columbia, South Carolina, where I did marketing and public affairs. While my husband was deployed in Djibouti, Africa. I'm married to an FMF corpsman. And then while on recruiting duty, after having our third child, I ended up injured with multiple organ prolapses and ended up having to leave the Marine Corps in a really, I wouldn't wish my transition on anybody else. Started working at Purdue University, and then it eventually led me to running for Indiana State Senate. And then I got a job offer at the Department of Agriculture, which is where I am now doing public relations.
I think that's the bridge. Awesome. That's good right there. Well, I'll go back a little bit to the Indiana State Senate that you just gazed over that real quick. How was that run, and what did you learn from that?
I had never planned on joining or on office or anything like that. Anybody listening who knows me knows that I'm probably the least political person. My nickname was Blunt Bartley in the Marine Corps. So not like your ideal person by any means, but in my transition out of the Marine Corps, I had so many issues and officials who talked a big game about supporting veterans. And then when it came time to actually supporting them, they didn't do it. I had a congressional inquiry in that my elected officials did nothing about. The state of Indiana has a ton that they should be and could be doing for veterans that they choose not to. And I was on a podcast talking about a organization I had started for women veterans specifically. And after that, the host was like, have you ever considered running for office? And I was like, no. And she was like, well, your district is open. You would have to apply by, I think it was in 2 days or something like that. And so at the time I was working at Purdue, and I, me and my husband talked, and I'm very much of the faith that everything happens for a reason and there's a sign for it. And so I took that very much as a sign, why would this person ask me this, right? Because it's not a conclusion I ever would have come to myself if it wasn't a sign that I needed to do more and that I could do more. And so obviously had to talk to my husband, and then had to talk to Purdue and make sure that I could do that, because I didn't want Indiana State Senate is not something you can live off of that salary. It's essentially considered part-time. And so everything went through. It was all yep, you can do it. And so I ended up running for state senate and had never ran a campaign. And oh, by the way, it was 2020 when COVID hit. So my whole campaign strategy to begin with was, I was going to get kneecap to kneecap with as many people as possible, really talk to them. I had very thought out initiatives and had no loyalty to a party. It was that I believed that there were things that should have been done and people should be working across the aisle, and they weren't, and that needed to be done, and then it needed to be about taking care of Hoosiers. And I ran my campaign kind of different than probably everybody else ran their campaign, very grassroots, but COVID hit, and I live in a rural area. And so that made it very hard, but we still had a historic campaign. I ended up being the first pregnant woman to run for Indiana State Senate. And it was a great learning experience of Hoosiers, the needs, politics. I saw a lot of things that I understood how corrupt it can be and how easy it would be for somebody to be corrupt in that system, and just so many things that I'm glad I learned it, but I have no desire to run for office again. um, yeah, and it was a really great learning experience, and my goal was to run a campaign unlike I had seen before, and I felt like we met that mission. I had people who had never voted for that party who voted for me because they stood behind what I stood behind. I had people who had never registered to vote before in their life, and they went to register just so they could vote for me. And so I think those things were like, okay, we really did something here.
You made a difference, definitely.
Yeah,
Like
and
you
that
just said,
was and
yeah,
that was the and that was the thing. The whole drive was to be the change, to be part of, like, that this is how it can be run, that it can actually be about the people you're serving.
exactly. And that's the whole part of service, per political service, especially political office. You're serving constituents, and I think that's lost nowadays across the board, from local all the way up to federal. It's lost that you're actually serving someone other than yourself, and I think we need to bring that back.
I agree. And that's where, I open it up. If anybody wants to connect with me, I am happy to share my experience. If you like, I don't care what your party is, anything like that. If you have any interest in running for office and you just want somebody to like talk to about it, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I am more than happy to have those conversations because I feel like we need more people running for those positions who don't think that they should be in those positions, that don't think that they're qualified, because those are the individuals we need.
Right, the ones that don't think they fit are the ones that fit. So that's
Yeah.
the ones you want right there. And you said you started a women's veteran organization. Tell us about that. And I know we need more that are actually aligned with women and their views and their needs, because there's a lot of different needs between the men and the women who served, and we all have crazy needs in the middle, but there's needs on both sides of it. So tell me about a little more about that.
Yeah, so my gender honestly didn't really matter in the Marine Corps, and when it did for me, it was a positive. However, my transition, it wasn't the same. I had mentioned earlier that I had had multiple organ prolapses, and this is, something that's unique to women. And it took me months of fighting TRICARE to even get a diagnosis of what was wrong with me, what could be done to fix the issue. I mean, I couldn't stand for more than a few minutes without severe pain. It was causing panic attacks. It was causing all of these other physical issues. Couldn't hold my bladder, all of these things. And I go for my evaluation 2 days before my EAS, to potentially go up on a med board, for the provider to tell me that what I was going through wasn't life or death, and that plenty of women live with it and the VA could fix me.
Of course.
I couldn't function. Yet you expect me to leave the Marine Corps in 2 days, find a career, find a job, because, oh, by the way, I mentioned my husband earlier. We were dual military. We had children, and we realized we could not be dual military together and give our children the life we wanted to. And so he sacrificed his career in the Navy and gave that up so that I could stay in the Marine Corps, because it seemed like my career was trajectorying a little more. So a few months after that decision, this all happens. Like, I mean, just a whirlwind. And so I always say that my transition was the most mentally and physically and emotionally challenging time of my life. And it was tied to my gender so much. I remember the first time I saw a group of Marines. They were in the Marine Corps League. And I was so excited to see Marines. And I walk up to them, and the first thing they say is, "Oh, it's a POG, WM." And okay, yes, I'm not pretending that I'm in infantry, but for you, like, and it wasn't in that like joking, funny way. It was in that like look down,
Yep.
degrading way. And so I was just like, okay. And that was the same reaction I was getting from veteran organization, like all of the veteran organizations I was interacting with. And so at that point, I don't like to say that I was suicidal, but with fighting for this physical care, fighting for this mental care, I got to a point where I felt like this complete burden. And I understood how in the transition, a veteran could get to the point of suicide. And in that moment, I was, sitting in my car in the parking lot, just like absolutely losing it. And a Marine reached out to me and it just, had the conversation I needed. It reminded me that I wasn't a burden. And I had this amazing support system. My husband is the most amazing man ever. I had the most amazing family. I moved back home to have the support system, and I still was in that place. And so in that moment, I knew that I had to do something, whatever I could, so that others didn't feel like that. And so that's where it led me to start a organization in Lafayette, Indiana for women veterans. And we had a few meetups, and within the first meetup, I met 3 other female veterans who had the same physical disabilities that I had, and we were all in 3 different generations of serving. And to all of a sudden not feel alone, to feel like I could talk about these things, that then led to us being able to kind of integrate a little more. And I found other female veterans who were in the local DAV and then in the local like counties veteran group. And so luckily it did lead into a very much bridge into other veteran organizations. But yeah, there initially it was like my gender mattered more than anything else to all of these people, and especially to civilians that I interacted with. And it was just mind-boggling. I wasn't expecting that.
Wow. And when you said that you and your husband came to the conclusion for him to get out and you stay in, and then this happened to you, that had to rip the guts out of both of you. Actually, at that point, you were going through basically the same thing as ripping everything out of you because you were in so much pain, so much stuff going on. And then, of course, the mighty TRICARE doing the things they do to make sure that nothing comes to help out, or nothing works the right way at the first or second, maybe fourth time. And that helped out a lot. And you said something earlier that you were not suicidal, but depression, even in the strongest person, you may not have the idea to take yourself out, but you're at that point where you want to hurt yourself, just remove yourself from the equation. And I can understand you going through that and knowing as strong as you are, just based on what I've read about you, what learning about you, just talking to you, that had to be even more of a gut punch, knowing that you were basically almost helpless at that point.
Yeah. And then, looking at my husband having to bear the burden of all of it was so hard. And especially, again, I wasn't deployed. I didn't have, these experiences that I think a lot of us feel like we're almost not justified in feeling what we feel because we didn't experience combat or we didn't experience that, or our trauma somehow doesn't measure up. And so it was really hard to feel like I could ask for help. And I actually didn't ask for help. My husband had to go to a doctor's appointment with me, which with good and bad at the VA, I've had some amazing providers. And my PCM and my counselor in Indiana were phenomenal. But my husband had to go to the appointment with me to ask to be seen for mental health, right? Like we go through this whole appointment and then the doctor's looking at me and my husband's looking at me. She's like, anything else? And he's like looking at me and I don't say anything. He's like, nope, actually we do. XYZ, we think we'd like to try some counseling. And I'm glad it did, because it saved my life.
That's awesome right there. And I'm glad that you found the right provider. And like you said, not all of horror stories come from the VA. Yeah, I had my trials and tribulations when I first got out. The first one I went to, he didn't even look at me. He looked at his computer. I sat to his right, and he said, I'm gonna issue you these medications because I take them. I said, what's that mean? And I didn't know what they were. So when he got delivered to my house, I took them and right to the police station, to the amnesty box, because I had no idea what the drugs were or what they would do to me. So I didn't trust him at all from that point. And then I found out I got a real good one now, and me and him work together. He knows everything I need and what I need to do to get better, and the whole team working well. So I definitely understand the VA problem or situation. So hopefully your husband, I'm sure he was a green side Navy guy, being as a corpsman, working with the grunts in the front, on the forward, like you said, Djibouti. hopefully he has gotten his care as well while making sure you got your care.
That's a topic for another discussion. We're working on it.
Sometimes we're hard-headed on our side of the fence. So.
Yep.
Definitely so. So let's talk about what you do now. I mean, you're the first female president of the veterans of the U.S. Agricultural Department, right? So
Yeah.
again, you keep all these firsts, and I don't think you realize what you're doing when you're doing all this. You're setting the bar high for the people behind you, and I think that's awesome because you're not saying no to anything. You're taking a challenge. That's something we say here all the time on the Misfit Nation. If you give us a challenge, we're going to do it. No matter what you say. Oh yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, we got you. We'll figure it out and we'll do it. And that's what you're doing. And you're basically the plank bearer for the generation behind you. So how did you fall into that, and what's the best part of it?
Yeah, so I actually didn't fall into it. So I think I'll start with like how I even got to USDA, because I wouldn't, be part of the veteran employee organization if it wasn't for, that career trajectory. So I was working at Purdue University on the fundraising side of the house. Amazing organization. Purdue is just amazing. If there's Boilermakers listening, you understand that like that is just a culture in and of itself. But I don't have a degree. I have 8 years of experience. But working for higher education, there's obviously going to be some point that like you're stuck. Fairly so, it's higher education, right? And so I didn't know what my career trajectory was. And although I was doing a lot of similar stuff to public affairs, I wasn't doing straight like public affairs. I wasn't, doing press releases. I wasn't writing, wasn't doing marketing, wasn't doing all the things that I had done in the Marine Corps and absolutely loved. And so there was a sailor that I had previously worked with when I was stationed at Quantico who worked at USDA, and he reached out to me asking if I was still interested in public affairs, any interest in moving back to DC. And I was like, well, yeah, my dream is to do public affairs again. And he was like, okay, well, our office is hiring what is called a non-competitive hire. And in the federal sector, it's essentially a job that isn't posted to USA Jobs. I was the only person who applied for it. The veteran liaison, I was able to give them my resume. They looked it over, scheduled an interview with the supervisors. I had one interview and I got a job offer. However, the waiting for the official job offer took like a lot of months. So I don't want to like get people's hopes up that it's like a super, super fast process. Sometimes it is, but for me, it was still like a lot longer process. I actually got, at the same time I interviewed for a position at Purdue, got it, and had been in that position for 5 months before actually getting the other job offer. And so they moved me to DC. And I was a GS 11 with 2 promotions built in without a degree, right? And so this was kind of like my door back into public relations and working for an organization in a place that not only did they value me, but more importantly, because Purdue valued me, but they knew what my experience in the Marine Corps meant. My 8 years of experience, they knew exactly what it meant. And so I have been there for 2.5 years, and almost right when I got on board, another Marine, of course, because we always, find the Marines, had me join the Veteran Employee Organization. And almost instantly within meeting the president at that time, he was like, you're going to take over for me. And this was like 2 years ago. He's like, yeah, you're going to take over for me. You're going to be the next president. And so he started involving me in things, different committees and different events, and having me be involved and kind of help with bring my public affairs expertise. I had the privilege of speaking at USDA's Veterans Day event last November. And then so the elections came up and I put my name in the hat. And so I was able to become the next president. And after the fact, I think a month after the fact, I found out that, yes, I am the first female that the USDA has had for their veteran employee organization, which, I mean, it is really cool. But I think what's cooler is the fact that because of the culture, I didn't know that I was the first female, right? It didn't feel like I'm doing anything like epic or like first or like trailblazing by any means. the organization has embraced me and supported me so much that I didn't know that until he mentioned it and was like, "Hey, you realize you're the first female?" I was like, "Well, no, I didn't." And then initially I go into my PR, like, how can we use this to help promote our organization and the USDA?
That's outstanding. Almost falling into it. So that's good right there. And being unaware that you were the first one, so that even makes it even more special. I think that you didn't know that you were running into it saying, "I'm going to be the first female." No, you won fair and square, and without that thing above you saying, as my campaign banner, "I'm going to be the first female."
And the goal, at least for me, with all of these things, like I do believe we need to celebrate the first, but we also like the goal is to like hopefully we don't have to celebrate them anymore, right? Because the hope is that we become as diverse as America is with things, and that it's not such a shell shock when things like that happen. But furthermore, it's like all of those, I have this like belief that it's not just the first person to do something. It's all of those people up until that point that made it happen, right? All of those battles that were won and even the battles that were lost, like those struggles should be supported and talked about just as much. And especially like when I was in the Marine Corps, I didn't talk about my gender as much as I do now, but there's so many things that as Marines that I feel like you can't talk about. We're talking postpartum care and that type of stuff because it feels taboo. And we need to talk about it so that we can better support those service members. Like I shouldn't have been injured. I had no idea that 6 weeks after having a baby, that going on an 8-mile hike, carrying my camera gear could result in that type of injury. I had no idea. And so the hope is that like by me sharing my stuff, that can be something that can be talked about and prevented because it could have been prevented, right? Like that should be something that our job is to be fit. It shouldn't be so hard to know like postpartum how to take care of ourselves.
Right. And how long it takes to come back. It's not like an overnight thing. It's not
Yeah.
overnight success after you have a baby. And you're pushing a human out of you. And it's not like, "Hey, I'm good. I'll come out tomorrow and I'm going to bench press 250. I'm good." No, you can't do that. And I think that's a lesson learned. You learned the extreme hard way, of course. And
Yes.
I had a female soldier the night before she was supposed to go to air assault school, found out she was pregnant. And everything for us was numbers to go to that school. Numbers. Dang it. Can you just go and maybe have an air assault baby? And then I said, "No, we can't do that. We tomorrow when you come in, we'll get you the commander, you get your counseling, and we'll take care of you. And then when you're done with your postpartum," I think in the Army, I think it's 6 months after that, after the baby's born, that's when you start the actual full physical activity. You do postpartum PT and such. But at that point, then you can start thinking about maybe going to air assault school. But my first thought right away was, "Wow, I'll have the first air assault baby." And
But you know what's funny? There's things in the Marine Corps that the Marine Corps, at least in the leadership I had, that they did so well. Like, so I was breastfeeding, and I remember at the recruiting station, because I would travel all over South Carolina, visit different schools. My recruiters all knew I had just had a baby. And so when I was coming, they would check, like, "Hey, are you breastfeeding? If we're at this school, do you need a room to pump in?" And it wasn't weird. And so I've never seen that in the civilian world because and I don't know if maybe because on recruiting, most people kind of tend to be older and like have a lot of, kids. And so the other thing was like us sharing like their wives' birth stories seemed to happen a lot, which seems like a weird conversation, but Marines, I guess they'll talk about anything.
Yeah, it's just normal. It's like having lunch. It's good. Pass the crayon. Let's talk about this, and then everyone's good at that point. So, we do have a question in the audience here. Let's see here. So, what are some of the veteran issues that USDA can help with? Farm grant help, getting started in AG related business. What are some examples?
Yeah, so USDA offers a ton of resources when it comes to veterans. So USDA actually has 29 agencies. I work for AMS, which is the Agricultural Marketing Service, and our agency has a massive amount of grants. Like I trying to even like think of them. We have so many. One of them that is like our big one is called the Specialty Crop Block Grant, and this is funding that's given to the states, and then you apply through your state. But like when I visited Indiana for work, I actually saw a farmer who created this whole program for veterans and bees, and he received a big portion of his grant was the specialty crop block grant, as well as I talked about non-competitive hiring earlier. So USDA utilizes different hiring career paths as well as pathways and internships for veterans to get hired within agriculture. But really any aspect of agriculture, there's different grants. USDA even offers home grants. So I am missing so many things and probably not really answering your question because the answer is so vague to that. But like any other specific questions, let me know and I can help. I can help point you in the right direction.
Jake is our resident redneck, the one who asked that question. He is actually born in Indiana. He lives in Kentucky now, so don't hold that against him.
Oh, well, tell him to contact me. Contact me after the show, and I can get you the right point of contacts and help point you in the right way. But yeah, there's so many resources within USDA depending on what part of ag. We did just have, I think it was a month ago, a big webinar series of like beginning farmers for veterans. But I could just ramble off. The amount of things we do is almost endless. So yeah, message me and I can give you more direct help through USDA. Yeah.
Across the hotel room across the hall from me right now. So
that's so funny.
He's my travel buddy this trip.
Yeah. And we are so if you're interested in learning about careers in USDA, so we are having a veteran career fair March 12th. That again, I'll push that out across my platform. So if you're interested in a career in agriculture and a federal career, that would be a great opportunity to learn more about AMS and USDA.
All right, we got a question from Christopher Elder. You know him as well as I do. What resource was the most valuable resource in regards to your transition for figuring out what was next?
So I will say I was lucky in regards to I knew that I didn't want to change careers, and that did make my transition a little easier. Now, when I did transition, I started out on the fundraising side of the house at Purdue as an administrative assistant, and then I became a program manager for unit campaigns. A little different, but same career path. But there was this podcast called Recruiting Hell that was not a veteran-focused podcast, but it was Recruiting Hell. I mean, it talked about all things like hiring and just things that I didn't know anything about. And honestly, it being not veteran focused, I think helped me even more because the lingo and the conversations of information. And then the other thing for me has really been connecting and being a part of veteran organizations. I know earlier I had mentioned my bad experience with the Marine Corps League. I am lucky and happy to say that has not been my only experience. You know, I'm currently the public affairs officer for the Jack Moss Marine Corps League in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And it's because as I started telling my story on LinkedIn, I good and bad, started getting interactions. And there was one post that for some reason really made people feel some type of way and got a lot of negative. And it was again about my gender. And this commandant of the Jack Moss Marine Corps League, he's commenting, he's reaching out, and a year and a half before I moved to Virginia, and then found out I was moving. And as soon as he saw, he was like, "Hey, got a Marine." And so creating those connections and finding that support, that's hard because initially I thought I was going to be able to just like join these veteran organizations, and that wasn't my experience. But I can now say it is. I'm a member of the Marine Corps League. I'm part of Minority Veterans of America. I've been a part of like a bunch of different veteran organizations in a bunch of different capacities. And for me, it was very much finding that community again that was a help that then helped provide resources for me. But I was a little, I don't know if spoiled is the right word, but because I wasn't changing careers, I didn't have that challenge of how do I change careers and translate that and make that relevant. So I didn't have that struggle that a lot of people have in their transition.
You didn't have to do, what do I do with my hands at that point? So it's awesome.
Yeah.
So another question here is asking about Federal Hire Friday, and you also mentioned non-competitive hire. If you can dive into both of what that actually means, non-competitive hire and federal hire Fridays.
Yep. So I started this thing on LinkedIn where every Friday I share things from my personal experience getting hired in the federal, things I've learned about federal hiring. I am not an HR expert, so it's very much from my lens of experience. And so I talk a lot about like different pathways that are outside of USA jobs. If you are looking for a federal job, majority of the time those are posted on USA jobs, which is amazing. But it's not the only way into federal government. And so a non-competitive hire is what is called a special hiring authority. This is something that all federal agencies have the ability to do. They're kind of different capacities depending on the agency and the needs. And every agency department utilizes them different. Honestly, every hiring person utilizes them different. But at USDA, they are very good at non-competitive hire is for like if you are 30% disabled veteran, you can potentially get a non-competitive hire, and there's some other requirements. But if you follow my hashtag Federal Hire Friday, Fed Hire Friday, or follow me on LinkedIn, I share a lot more when it comes to how to get hired federally and kind of those different career paths and trajectories into the federal government.
Awesome. And you said 30%. So if you have a higher percentage, does that matter when you get hired, or does it, as long as you're 30%?
Yep. It's as long as you're 30%, or it's called Schedule A, or like some other disabilities. There's a whole list of them that's that again, I share on Federal Hire Friday, like the links to the actual like resources, not me saying it, but like, here's the link that you then can look at the details. And I also share those opportunities when I see them across AMS. And there's different agencies that share them more on LinkedIn, but it's starting to, more people in the federal government are starting to kind of share those resources, because the reality is, you know, that it feels very intimidating. And I feel like we're told a lot of things. Like, I am a sergeant, or I got out as a sergeant, and on the DoD side, never would they have given me a GS-11 with, you know, a 12-13 as a sergeant, because there just seems to be this lens of very much looking at you at your rank instead of looking at you on your experience. As we're non-DoD, I have seen them be a lot more like, what did you do? And be able to decipher that. But again, my experience has been with USDA, so I don't talk for all the agencies by any means, but there's also the Interagency Veterans Council, which I'm a part of that as well, but they help all the agencies with veteran hiring and recruiting and some other things. So that's another really good resource to look at and utilize. But yeah, Fridays on LinkedIn, I post about Federal Hire Friday.
There it is. And we'll just have to follow tab on Fridays and find out the tidbits that come out on Fridays. And I have seen them. That's why I was able to bring that up. And I've followed her since she was on the Home Sitter, our brother Willis's show. He also caught my comment about the crayons before. He was a little upset. I think he has a sad emoji on his shirt right now. But be all right. As long as I send him a box of Reds, it'll be good. So now you're also a podcast host. So
yes.
You stay busy all the time, kind of like all of us when we get out. You got to keep all the fires going in every circle around you, 360 fires. Tell us about your podcast.
Yes. So once we kind of got settled here in Virginia, I was looking at ways that I could be closer involved to the Marine Corps. I absolutely loved what I did in the Marine Corps. I loved telling the story of Marines, and I decided to start a podcast called the Oath We Took podcast, where we tell the Marine Corps story through sharing the stories of Marines. And it's not always painting the Marine Corps in the perfect light, because I fully believe that when you love something, that you have to talk about the good and the bad so that it can get better, right? Like there's conversations that need to be had. And so my podcast, we've had guests who have loved their time in the Marine Corps, and we've had guests who didn't. We've had people who have experienced some really extreme trauma and are still in and are making changes in the Marine Corps to be that change. And so the other cool thing is I've interviewed a lot of Marines that I personally know, and getting to tell their stories I'm getting emotional. I didn't even think I would, but like one of my best friends in the Marine Corps, Capers, him and I were PFCs at Quantico together. When I was doing his interview, we wrapped it up, but we were still recording, and he just stopped and he started crying, and he was like, I just have to say how sorry I am. Now that I'm going through my transition, I realized that I wasn't there for you. And I never felt like that, but to hear him say that and to hear how much I mean to him and the relationship, and our kids are his daughters are my nieces, and my kids are, it's just getting to tell the stories of Marines who normally wouldn't share their stories has been a blessing. And it has been a blessing to be able to digitize a piece of their stories. And so that's the hope with the podcast. You don't have to have loved your time in the Marine Corps. It doesn't have to be all sunshine and rainbows. I believe that every veteran has a story worth telling. I just am focusing on Marines because I'm only one person, right? So
You love both. There you go.
yes. And FMF sailors. FMF sailors. I haven't had one yet, but you will be on the podcast, and I'm happy to have you on the podcast as well.
And Jorge Herrera, if you're listening tonight, you will go and you will contact Tab and be on the show. If not, I will call you, and sometime you'll answer the phone and go on her show.
Yes.
So the Oath We Took, great show. If you have not checked it out, check it out. That's also just a little tidbit of what all Tab is doing right now. She's looking for ways to help everyone in every way possible, and that's amazing because not a lot of people would do that. And the best way to get you on LinkedIn is hashtag, I think you said Bartley. So that's going across the bottom right now. What else do you have coming up in the future, in the near future? Do you know of?
Oh, that I know of that I haven't talked about. I don't know if there's anything that I haven't talked about. Definitely, like if you're in the transition or a veteran and just looking for a different career, definitely come to USDA's Veterans Hiring Event on March 12th. Yeah, I don't know what else is coming up. Endless stuff.
All right. So from your time as public affairs in the Corps, what was the best thing you got to cover while doing that?
Oh, okay. So I had a math sergeant who was really, really scary. I guess that's like the fair. I didn't see him as scary because he was like our math sergeant, but he was kind of scary. And I was a young PFC at Quantico, and he was always like, "Don't be in the office if you don't need to be in the office. Like, go find your own story." And didn't have a car yet. Just got to Quantico. I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna find the coolest story." Well, I did. The McQuist instructors, and for those who don't know, those are the people who do our swim quals. They were doing a underwater promotion in the massive, like Olympic sized pool. And I don't even know how I connected with them or how I found this out. One thing led to another. And so one of the first stories I covered was an underwater promotion where I had like borrowed somebody's underwater camera, had taken underwater photos, and then had my nice camera, above water, like in a plastic bag, taking photos. And it was the first time that it's called like above the fold on the newspaper, like, front page of the newspaper, my photo. Such a cool, from a photography standpoint, from a story standpoint, there was a Marine when I was stationed at Quantico who had cancer, and he was on the shooting team, and he had beat cancer. It came back and he had beat it again, and then was like on the shooting team. And so I had the privilege of telling his story, and it was just so amazing to hear that story and to hear the struggles and just everything that he had gone through. It was just awesome to be able to tell that story.
I bet that sounds like it's an awesome story. That could also be a story that ripped at your heart too, because seeing what he's going through and all that.
It was. And I also do public affairs for the Marine Corps League, and this is probably one of my biggest regrets is we had 100-year-old Marine, Ralph Wilcox. So amazing. He could tell you everything that he had been through, like he was completely there. He got to throw the first pitch at a Fred Nats game, and I got to be on the field and take his photo. And one of my goals with starting the podcast was actually to be able to document his story. But unfortunately, he had passed away before I had recorded his story. So sadly, I don't have his story, but I did have the opportunity to talk with him and to take photos of him. And so I think that, again, that's like kind of the driving force too of like the podcast and the stuff is like, I want to be able to digitize people's stories so that their kids and their grandkids can hear a piece of what they went through.
And maybe have a picture made.
Yeah.
Picture developed just by listening to your words or reading your words and understanding what mom or dad or grandma or grandpa went through. So that'd be awesome. And of course, I asked you about the best time as a PAO. I'm sure there was a horrible story you had to cover. Well,
so I don't have a horrible story, but I told you earlier, Blunt Bartley, I got that name in the Marine Corps. That's what they called me on recruiting duty, and it very much stuck. And I was very vocal on a lot of things. Again, I loved the Marine Corps, but one of the events we did was the Marine Corps Educators Workshop, and it was an amazing event because you get to spend a week at Parris Island with these educators and have all of these conversations, these hard conversations, because you're actually sitting there conversing. And it was when sexual assault was very, very bad in the Marine Corps. I was a sexual assault victim advocate at the recruiting station, and it was something that I had talked about a lot. And I had created a post, and I don't really even remember what it said, but just something that like sexual assault is unacceptable in the Marine Corps. I won't stand for it. The Marines I know won't stand for it. We have a problem, XYZ. And this gunnery sergeant, and I was a corporal at the time, did not like my post because I was friends with a lot of the educators and felt that it painted the Marine Corps in a really bad light. And he comes in my office, he's screaming at me, "Why aren't you at parade rest?" You're in my office, Gunny, but okay. Cool. And so like I kind of do it, and I'm like not being belligerent, but like whatever, right? And he just goes off on this hussy and this meh. And I was like, Gunny, did you see that the CO commented on the post? You want to go talk to the XO? Like the whole command knew, but it was such an awkward, like for me, I was not used to not confrontation. I had plenty of confrontation, but it was like I wasn't used to being attacked, because that's what it was. It was like being attacked for something that wasn't even like this negative thing. It's more of a positive when you're being willing to have these honest conversations, with educators, because that's what they're looking for. They want to know what they can tell their students, and to pretend like everything's okay when it's not, like that's not good for anybody. So I'll say that was my worst moment, because it was just very like, what is this? I don't know how to handle this.
cringeworthy.
Yeah, it was very cringe, and I was stuck in my office. That was the thing. It wasn't like normally something like that would happen with a bunch of people, and I was just like, okay,
All right.
thank you. Yeah, what can I say to the Gunny?
You're right. You're the smart guy in the room. You got this.
So yeah, I would say that, but my good days far outweighed my bad days. If I wasn't injured, I would have, stayed in the Marine Corps. That was my goal and my dream was to stay in the Marine Corps. Unfortunately, it didn't work out.
Well, you're still doing great things where you are now, and you're still helping Marines, former and active Marines now, as they're still going through their trials and tribulations in their lives and careers. So I think you're still doing the right thing. You're on the right path where you were supposed to be.
I appreciate that.
No problem. So we've talked about a lot of things in 15 minutes. I can't believe it's 50 minutes already. It was pretty quick. But if you can give advice to the Marine that's starting their journey to get out, what would that be right now? 3 things that would make their transition more better as they take that step out.
The first thing I'm going to say is drop your damn pack. You gave enough. It is now time for your command to step in. drop your damn pack, focus on you, focus what you need to do for your transition. Not if you're like 2 years out though. I mean, if like you're literally transitioning. The second thing is share your story. Start documenting what you are doing in the military, because that is your living resume. That is what you're doing. Start sharing what you're doing and start sharing things about yourself. And third thing, start getting mental health or looking at your holistic health now, because I can guarantee you that when you transition out, every physical, mental ailment that you didn't even realize you have, it is going to be exerted. I say holistic health because there are a ton of options when it comes to mental health. I do biocraniosacral therapy. I do energy work. I do, a lot of spiritual work, as well as, what I eat, and then regular counseling, psychology. So don't wait to get that stuff. And so those are my three main advice.
There's our resident redneck jumping on. Thank you, Tab. Best of luck to you. I'll get your contact info.
Perfect.
That's the resident redneck jumping from across the hallway. Tab, this has been awesome hanging out with you tonight. Like I said, that I don't usually have great internet connection, but you came on and the internet connection worked here in Indiana, and even you were doubtful that it would work, but it worked.
I was.
Thank you for coming on. I look forward to seeing the great things you do in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been fun. Have a great night.
You too.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Did you serve in the military? If so, you can obtain a free lifetime pass to more than 2,000 federal recreation sites. These sites are located across more than 400 million acres of public lands, including national parks, wildlife refuges, and forests. The lands host activities to fit any lifestyle: hiking, biking, fishing, camping, and much more. Gold Star families are also eligible for these free lifetime passes. Plus, they cover entrance fees for a driver and all passengers in a car, or up to 3 additional adults at sites that charge per person. Obtaining one is easy. Just go to the National Park Service website, nps.gov, or the National Park Service app.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the MisFitNation Show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are Misfit Nation.